In a city humming with ambition and quiet injustice, Elijah Reed, a gifted young black courier juggling late-night food deliveries and the weight of raising his younger sister, pedals through life unnoticed, until a twist of fate lands him inside a millionaire's mansion during a high-society event. When he's granted an impulsive moment at the piano, his electrifying performance stuns the elite crowd, ignites whispers across the city, and sets off a powerful chain of events that challenges everything he thought he knew about opportunity, identity, and the cost of stepping into a world that was never built for him. If you liked the video and subscribe to the channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. Sweat clung to Elijah's forehead as he pedaled through the thick Atlanta heat, his electric bike humming beneath him. The box strapped to the back bore the unmistakable red and yellow logo of Quick Dash, the food delivery app that had consumed the last 2 years of his life. Between balancing school, rent, and taking care of his younger sister, Ava, the hustle never really stopped. But Elijah didn't complain. He had music in his ears, wheels under him, and fingers that danced on keys whenever he found a free piano. He just didn't get many chances anymore. His mother used to say, "Your hands were made for more than handlebars and heat." Before the stroke took her voice, she filled the house with jazz records and dreams of Juilliard. Now, silence lingered where her voice once lived, and Elijah filled the gap with determination. He worked doubles. He cooked for Ava. And when he had a second, he found a way to play. Libraries, churches, hotel lobbies, anywhere with ivory and a little patience. That day's delivery was strange though. He'd never seen an address like it on the app. East Langford Estate, Hillside Drive, he muttered, tapping his GPS. The ride would take 35 minutes, mostly uphill, through gated neighborhoods and towering oaks. His tip would have to be solid to make it worth the trip. He zipped up his jacket and started pedaling. Miles away, behind stone walls and acres of manicured lawn, Everett Langford stood by his glass-paneled kitchen, sipping imported coffee while ignoring the stream of guests entering his home. An aging tech mogul who had built a fortune designing payment software for banks, Langford was known as a recluse. One of those eccentric millionaires people whispered about but rarely saw in public. Today was an exception. His wife insisted on throwing a charity event for the Atlanta Philharmonic, some high society shindig with wine, string quartets, and enough old money to fund a small country. Langford, who hated music almost as much as he hated people, agreed only because it meant the spotlight would be off him and on his wife's foundation. He watched them arrive, suits, gowns, laughter that echoed through marble hallways. In the center of the great room stood his late mother's 1926 Steinway Grand, polished to perfection. "Let them have their party," Langford muttered. "Just don't touch the damn piano." Back in the city, Elijah weaved through cars, the breeze drying sweat on his neck. His phone buzzed in the mount beside his handlebars. High priority. Double tip if on time. He pushed harder, muscles burning as the elevation rose and the skyline faded behind him. He arrived at the gates of Hillside Drive with 5 minutes to spare. A uniformed guard looked up from his clipboard. "Delivery?" Elijah nodded, panting. "Langford. Order 5128. The guard didn't answer right away. He took one look at Elijah, his dark skin, his Quick Dash hoodie, his scuffed bike, and raised an eyebrow. "You sure you got the right house?" Elijah forced a smile. "That's what the app says." A moment's pause, then the gate buzzed open. He pedaled through a winding path lined with fountains and towering hedges until the mansion came into view. It looked more like a hotel than a house. Inside, string music wafted through open doors. People milled around with champagne flutes and amused glances. Elijah parked near the back and walked up the stone steps, bag in hand. A staff member took the food. Elijah turned to leave, but something caught his eye. There, past the crowd and the hors d'oeuvres, sat the Steinway Grand, black, regal, a spotlight kissing its curves like it belonged on stage. He paused, heart pounding. Even from across the room he could see it was tuned. He could almost hear it call to him. He didn't realize Langford had walked up behind him. "You play?" the millionaire asked. Elijah stiffened. Yeah, a bit." Langford squinted at him. "What's your name, kid?" "Elijah." "Ever played a Steinway?" "No, sir." Langford studied him, then did something Elijah didn't expect. He shrugged. "It's just a piano. If you want to play, go ahead." Elijah blinked. "Seriously?" Langford nodded. "Just don't mess it up. It belonged to my mother." Then he turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving Elijah stunned. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Some guests had noticed the courier standing near the piano, and their expressions darkened. "That's bold," one woman whispered to her husband. "He's not even dressed for the room. Maybe he thinks we need entertainment," the man replied, chuckling. Elijah felt the heat return to his face, not from the ride this time but from something deeper. He wanted to leave. He should have walked out the moment the food was handed off. But the keys were right there, gleaming like a dream half remembered. And something inside him whispered, "Play." Elijah didn't move. His sneakers were glued to the marble floor, eyes fixed on the Steinway like it might vanish if he blinked. The murmurs behind him sharpened, clipped words, tight laughter, the unmistakable sound of judgment. A man in a blue blazer with silver cufflinks whispered, "They'll let anyone in these days." Elijah swallowed hard. But he wasn't 12 anymore. Not like the first time he sat at a piano. That had been at a church in Southside Atlanta, Good Hope Baptist, where the pews creaked and the choir sang like their lungs were trying to save the world. Elijah was small then, gangly and awkward, with calloused hands from helping his uncle fix cars. He remembered sneaking into the sanctuary after Sunday service, drawn to the upright piano at the front of the room. It was missing 2 keys, smelled faintly of lemon oil and mildew, and it might as well have been a spaceship. The first time he touched a key he flinched. Not because it was loud but because it was beautiful. His fingers wandered, unsure, then purposeful. The vibrations crawled up his arms and settled somewhere in his chest. He didn't know chords or scales. But he found something that day, something pure. Something free. The pastor's wife, Sister Annette, had stood quietly in the doorway, arms folded. "You taught yourself that?" Elijah had panicked, leaping off the bench like he'd been caught stealing. But she waved him back. She became his first teacher. They didn't have money for lessons, not really. But Sister Annette gave him an old workbook and told him to practice an hour after school. More if he wanted. He practiced until his fingers cramped. It was like a secret language only he could speak, and every time he played he remembered what it felt like to belong. Then came the middle school talent show. Elijah had begged the principal to let him perform, rehearsing for weeks. He chose "River Flows in You" by Yuruma, not because it was flashy but because it moved like water and pain and something too deep for words. The day of the performance he showed up in a pressed white shirt, tie slightly crooked. He sat at the old stage piano and played with everything he had. Afterward, a boy named Kyle from 8th grade said, "Didn't know y'all could play piano like that. Thought y'all were more into basketball or whatever." Another laughed and said, "Bet your mama used to play for tips at the bus station." Elijah never forgot the way the audience had clapped for him, then watched in silence as the 2 boys high-fived and walked off laughing. His mother found him crying in the bathroom that night. She sat beside him and held his face in her soft hands. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice a song in itself, "don't let people who ain't got the music tell you how to dance." He tried to believe that. Even when in high school his audition tape for a prestigious music camp got lost. Even when his music teacher told him maybe he should focus on sports scholarships instead. Even when Ava came home crying because a girl said her brother acted white for playing Beethoven. Elijah played through it all. Played until the world got quiet. Played when his mom's words began to slur, the right side of her face going still, and the ambulance came. He was 17 then. The doctors said she'd had a severe stroke. She would never speak again, not clearly. Ava was only 9. That day, Elijah walked into the hospital chapel and played the same broken melody over and over again, until the keys were wet with tears, and the nurse asked if he needed someone to talk to. He didn't. The piano was the someone. Back in the Langford mansion, Elijah stood frozen in time. The piano was just a few feet away, but it felt miles off. His fingers itched. He didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing him hesitate. He didn't want to run again. He heard his mother's voice in his memory, one of the last recordings he had on his phone from when her words still came out clean. "Elijah, you make those keys tell the truth, baby." He stepped forward. Someone nearby scoffed. "He's really gonna do it." He ignored it. The marble underfoot echoed his steps. The bench was colder than he expected. He sat down and let his hands hover over the keys, heart thundering. He didn't touch anything yet. Just waited. The crowd had quieted. The hum of the string quartet faded away. A few phones were out now, discreet, unsure. He thought of Ava, bright-eyed, waiting at home with peanut butter crackers and a math book on the table. She'd say, "Did you play anything good today?" He thought of Sister Annette, and the crooked old piano at Good Hope. He thought of every door that closed and every sideways glance that tried to tell him this was not his space. And still, he played. Elijah exhaled as if preparing to dive underwater. The great room of the Langford mansion had gone still enough to hear the fizz of champagne in someone's glass, the squeak of a waiter's shoes on polished marble. Faces turned, curious and doubtful. A few guests leaned in, amused. Others looked like they were waiting for a disaster to unfold. The Steinway Grand stood before him like a gate between two worlds, the one where he delivered pad thai in take-out bags, and the one where music was more than a luxury. It was the language of legacy. A language he'd been told, explicitly and implicitly, didn't belong to someone like him. He rested his fingers on the keys. Smooth. Cool. Responsive, like a sleeping beast waiting to roar. A hush fell so thick it had weight. His breath caught. Then he played. He didn't start with anything classical. No Chopin or Mozart. That would have been expected. And Elijah had never played for expectations. He started with a whisper, a soft progression in a minor, something jazz-influenced but unplaceable. Something his. A melody built from his late nights and long rides, the sorrow of watching his mother fade and the laughter of hearing Ava tell him she got a B+ in math like it was the Nobel Prize. The notes flowed rich and round. Not too fast. Not flashy. Just honest. In the first few measures he painted sorrow. The keys wept in quiet intervals. Guests shifted, expecting the awkward stumble of a nervous amateur. But it never came. By the fourth measure, heads turned more fully. Conversation stopped. The staff along the wall paused their tray rotations. Someone at the back of the room set down their glass with a soft clink. Elijah was somewhere else now. He wasn't in a mansion. He wasn't a courier. He wasn't the kid who got laughed at in the school auditorium, or the teenager who stood in the corner of the music room waiting for a teacher who never really saw him. He was in that church again, the light from the stained glass falling in dusty shafts. He was in the hospital chapel, playing his grief into the echoing walls. He was back in his bedroom, fingers hovering over a busted keyboard that made buzzing sounds when he played too hard. He let the chords swell, blooming into complexity, then stripped them bare again, turning sorrow into resolve, pain into rhythm. It wasn't classical. It wasn't jazz. It wasn't gospel. It was Elijah. People in the room looked around as if trying to figure out how they were supposed to respond. This wasn't some parlor trick. This was a performance. Real. Raw. Langford himself appeared in the back, nursing a whiskey and watching silently, his head tilted. Elijah moved into a faster section, fingers trilling and leaping in syncopated stabs. The piano vibrated under him as if it too were catching its breath. He spun into a descending sequence, then pivoted to a major key, a moment of light breaking through the clouds. A gasp rose from someone near the front. Not dramatic. Just stunned. And then, as if on cue, a ripple of emotion swept through the room. Not everyone got it. But they knew what they were witnessing wasn't common. This wasn't a courier playing a tune. This was an artist commanding his stage. But it wasn't all applause, not yet. Near the punch bowl, a middle-aged man with a crimson tie leaned toward a silver-haired woman and said too loudly, "Not bad for a delivery boy." Elijah heard it. He always heard it. But this time he didn't let it crawl under his skin. Instead, he pressed harder, twisting the piece into something darker, throwing jazz against dissonance, flipping rhythm on its head. The melody danced a little meaner now, more defiant. He layered in chords like bricks in a wall, each one laid with purpose. He didn't flinch. He didn't stop. He owned it. The guests began to move closer, drawn by the force of the performance. Some set their glasses on nearby tables. A few even sat on the edge of the sleek couches arranged in showroom angles. The air shifted from judgment to awe. And that's when Elijah made a choice. He paused, just for a second, and pivoted to Clair de Lune. It was bold. Audacious even. But he didn't play it like a French impressionist. He made it his. He slowed it, dipped it in velvet, gave it swing. Each note melted into the next like candle wax, until Debussy became something else entirely, familiar but reborn, elegant and aching. A woman near the piano actually wiped a tear from her cheek. The man who'd mocked earlier stared now, his drink untouched. When the last note rang out, a high feather-soft D, the room remained suspended in silence. No one moved. No one dared. Elijah's fingers rested in his lap. He didn't look up yet. He just breathed, letting the silence carry its own kind of music. Then, from somewhere in the back came a single pair of hands clapping. Langford. Slow. Measured. And then, more hands. Dozens. Thunderous applause broke the silence like a dam. People rose to their feet, clapping with stunned disbelief, like they'd just seen lightning strike twice. The man in the crimson tie didn't clap at first. But when the people next to him began to cheer, he gave a few slow claps and looked away. Elijah stood. His chest was tight but not with fear. With something else. Pride. He looked up, and saw Langford making his way toward him, cutting through the crowd like a shark through still water. Elijah, is it? Langford said when he reached him. Elijah nodded, still catching his breath. Langford extended his hand. That was unexpected. Thank you, Elijah said, gripping it firmly. I didn't know the delivery gig came with encores. A chuckle passed through the surrounding guests. Elijah smiled faintly. You said it was just a piano. Langford smirked, considering. Maybe not in the right hands. He turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears our caterer brought more than hors d'oeuvres. Laughter. Applause again. Someone shouted, play another. Elijah glanced toward the kitchen exit. His bag was still by the staff door. He could leave now. Head back to Ava. Maybe pick up another delivery or two before the night shift ended. But for the first time in a long time he didn't feel like leaving. He felt like staying. The applause had faded, but the feeling remained, like something in the room had shifted, like the air had gotten thicker and thinner at the same time. Elijah stood beside the Steinway, trying to keep still even as adrenaline surged through his limbs. He played a lot of pianos, but never like that. Never with an audience dressed in tuxedos and diamonds, in a house where the wine cost more than his rent. He wiped his hands discreetly on his quick-dash hoodie, suddenly hyper-aware of every wrinkle in his clothes, every smudge on his shoes. But then again, he hadn't come here to impress anyone. He'd come to drop off stir-fried noodles and shrimp rolls. And yet, he'd done something they hadn't expected. And they didn't know what to do with it. Mr. Langford, a man said, approaching with a silver tray of drinks. Should we get the quartet back on? Langford waved it off without looking. No need. I think the highlight of the evening's already passed. He turned to Elijah. You said your name's Elijah? Yes, sir. You trained professionally? Elijah shook his head. Mostly self-taught. Some lessons when I was younger. Church mostly. I just listened a lot. Langford raised an eyebrow. That wasn't just listening, son. That was decades of refinement. Elijah gave a half smile. More like a decade of no sleep. Langford let out a quiet chuckle. Then he gestured to the hallway just behind the grand room. Walk with me. Elijah glanced toward his bag still sitting by the back door. He hesitated, but nodded. The guests parted slightly as Langford led him past polished walls, chandeliers, and soft carpets so thick Elijah's shoes barely made a sound. They entered a library lined with walnut bookshelves and thick, sound-dampening drapes. Langford poured himself another glass of something dark, then offered one to Elijah. I'm good, Elijah said. Langford sat behind a desk, resting his glass beside a leather-bound planner. You know, most people in that room didn't expect much from you. You know why? Elijah met his gaze. Because I look like I deliver food, not Chopin? Langford smiled faintly. Something like that. I'm used to it. I believe you. He paused. But it shouldn't be normal. That kind of prejudice. It is, Elijah said quietly. Langford leaned back. You know who my mother was? Abigail Langford. Southern socialite. Concert pianist in the 40s. Debuted at Carnegie Hall. Could have been one of the greats, if she hadn't married my father and traded in recitals for fundraisers. I read about her once, Elijah said. She had a famous Chopin recording. Langford nodded. On that piano you played. Elijah turned slightly, remembering the way the keys responded to him, like they recognized the music in his blood. She must have been amazing. She was. And a perfectionist. Would have had a fit if she knew a Courier just played her Steinway barefoot in sneakers. That pulled a laugh from Elijah. Langford let it hang. Then the old man leaned forward. I want to offer you something. Elijah stiffened. I don't know what you do full-time, besides delivering pad thai and humbling my guests, but I can get you in touch with a few people. Conservatory heads. Music foundations. Sponsors. I have favors to call in even now. Elijah blinked. Wait, are you serious? I don't joke with money. I didn't ask for anything. Langford nodded. Exactly why I'm offering. Elijah took a step back. He rubbed his palms together, suddenly uneasy. I don't want to be someone's charity case. This wouldn't be charity, Langford said. This would be placement. You've got talent. But talent means very little without access. And let's be honest, access hasn't exactly been handed to you. Elijah looked away. And what happens after? I show up in a conservatory and people assume I'm the janitor? Then you play. The room was quiet. Langford studied him. You've got a fire, son. But fire burns out without fuel. I'm not saying this changes your life overnight. But it opens a door. And doors matter. Elijah sat down slowly across from him. You know, the last time someone told me I should be a musician, it was my mom. She used to say my fingers were too soft to stay poor forever. She said my music made her forget her legs didn't work anymore. Langford tapped his glass, thoughtful. I imagine she'd want you to walk through that door. Elijah nodded, but there was weight in his eyes. I've got a little sister, Eva. She's 12. I pick her up from school, help her with homework, cook dinner. I don't get to run off and follow dreams. Who said anything about running off? Langford said. I'm talking about building something. Slow if it needs to be. But real. A knock sounded on the door. It opened an inch. Mr. Langford? The guests are asking if the young man will play again. Langford looked to Elijah. Up to you. Elijah hesitated. Then he stood. One more. For my sister. He played Ava's Waltz, a melody he'd written months ago on the back of a napkin while waiting outside her school. It was soft, full of space, like a lullaby dipped in moonlight. The guests listened in silence again. And this time, no one said a word when the Courier sat at the Millionaire's piano. They just listened. By the time Elijah got back to the apartment, it was past 10. He carried a brown paper bag with 2 chocolate croissants from a 24-hour bakery downtown, slightly squashed from the ride but still warm. Ava was still up, curled on the old plaid couch in her Minnie Mouse pajama pants, a textbook balanced on her knees. Their living room was small, just a cracked coffee table, a flickering ceiling fan, and a lamp with a baseball cap as a lampshade. But it was clean. Home. The kind of place where you could breathe. You survived, she said without looking up. I always do. You said dessert. I pictured cookies. Or cake. Or a tower of cake. Croissants? Elijah said, tossing her the bag. Don't get greedy. Ava peeked inside and made a satisfied sound. Chocolate? You may live another day. He smiled, pulling off his hoodie and letting the night air cool the sweat on his skin. How was school? Mr. Patel said my essay was surprisingly mature. Then I realized I copied one of your old ones. He laughed and sank into the couch beside her. Just don't get smarter than me. Too late. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Ava munched. Elijah stared at the crooked frame on the wall, an old photo of their mom playing the piano at Good Hope Baptist, her hands suspended above the keys, her smile wide and sure. You play for rich people tonight? Ava asked, mouthful. He nodded slowly. Yeah. Richer than I knew people could be. Did they clap? Oh, they clapped. Good, she said. Mom would have made him clap twice. Elijah chuckled. Then he went quiet again. Ava noticed. What's wrong? He hesitated. There's this guy. Langford. He owns the house I played at. He saw something in me. Ava's eyes narrowed. What kind of something? He wants to help me. Offered mentorship. Connections. Classes. Money even. Her expression flickered, hopeful then guarded. Like a scholarship? Kind of. Like a bet, he said. He bets on people who don't get doors opened for them. Ava sat back, chewing slower. What's the catch? No catch, Elijah said, but it didn't feel entirely true. Just commitment. Time. Probably some hard choices. She looked up at him. You want to do it? He didn't answer right away. I don't know how to want it without messing everything else up, he finally said. This life we've got, it's a balance. You're in school. I'm working. Mom's meds, groceries, rent, it's all lined up like dominoes. If I move one, the rest fall. Ava went quiet. Then she said, "Dominoes are boring." He laughed. "That doesn't help." "You know what does?" she said, sitting up straighter. "Me knowing my brother's a genius who plays pianos like they owe him money. That helps." He gave her a look. She nudged him. "You can figure it out. You always do." He stared at the floor. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail loud. But you don't fail quiet like people expect us to." There was more wisdom in her 12-year-old voice than most adults he'd met. He looked at her, then at the picture of their mom. The same stubborn fire was in both their faces. "I'll talk to Langford," he said finally. "I'll figure out what's real." "Good," Ava said. "Because if I see that piano video on TikTok before you tell me everything, I'm suing you for emotional damage." He stared at her. "You think someone posted it?" She shrugged, then smiled mischievously. "The way people were holding up phones? You might already be famous." He groaned and collapsed into the couch cushions. "Let me know when the fan mail starts," she added. "I'll be your manager. 10% non-negotiable." The next morning, Elijah woke up to over 24 missed notifications. Most were from the Quick Dash app, routes, earnings, bonus incentives, but 4 texts stood out. "Sister Annette, someone sent me a video of you playing. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Proud doesn't even cover it. Caleb, studio guy from church. Bro, you serious? That was you? Dude, you played like a ghost with something to say. We gotta talk." Unknown number. "Hi Elijah. This is Dr. Maria Holmes from the Atlanta Conservatory. Everett Langford passed along your name. Would love to speak. Langford, told you they'd notice. Let's meet." "No. You pick the place. Bring questions. Bring honesty." He stared at the screen, his stomach tight. This wasn't a dream. It was a beginning. But beginnings always came with storms. Langford arrived at the diner 15 minutes early, seated at a corner booth with the kind of posture that said he hadn't slouched a day in his life. He wore a simple gray suit, nothing flashy but expensive in the way that whispered money instead of shouting it. Elijah slid into the booth across from him. "Hope you're hungry," Langford said, gesturing to the menu. "This place does a mean omelet." Elijah shook his head. "Coffee's fine." Langford studied him. "You look tired." "Life keeps moving even after a standing ovation." Langford gave a dry smile. "True." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Elijah leaned forward. "I need the truth. If I say yes to this, your offer, what happens next?" Langford set his coffee down. "You'll be connected to people who can help you grow. We'll find instructors, schedule lessons around your availability. If you need gear, you'll get it. If you need space, we'll rent it. If you need time, we'll find a way to give you some." Elijah nodded slowly. "And if I mess up?" Langford shrugged. "Then you mess up. But you'll have failed trying, not standing still." Elijah looked out the window. Cars passed. A city moved on. But for the first time he felt like he wasn't chasing it, maybe it was finally slowing down for him. "And what about Ava?" he asked. "She comes too when needed. Tutors. Programs for gifted students. I've got resources. You're not the only bet I've made, but you might be the best one." Elijah turned back, his face calm but eyes burning. "I don't need a savior." "I'm not offering salvation," Langford said. "I'm offering scaffolding. You still build it yourself." Elijah thought about it. Thought about the hours he spent playing until his knuckles ached. Thought about his mother's voice, long gone but still echoing in his heart. Thought about Ava and how she watched him like he held the sun. Then he said, "I'm in." Langford didn't smile. He just nodded once, satisfied. "Then we begin." The first time Elijah walked into the Atlanta Conservatory's West Wing, he felt like he was trespassing on someone else's dream. Everything was too clean, too polished. Students moved like they belonged, gliding down corridors in smart jackets and crisp black slacks. Their cases looked like spaceships, sleek, aerodynamic, custom-molded for violins or flutes worth more than Elijah's bike. The floors gleamed. The walls were lined with glossy photographs of composers, alumni, world-class musicians, all white smiles and ivory keys. Elijah tugged at his sleeves and kept walking. Langford had arranged for a 2-month introductory immersion, private lessons, open rehearsals, practice room access, and a weekly mentorship with one of the conservatory's directors. Everything was paid for in advance. Elijah was the only person in the program without a music degree or formal training. And the only one, it seemed, who wasn't white. He tried to ignore the stares. The polite ones were the worst, those quick glances that flicked from his skin to his clothes, followed by tight-lipped nods, like they were being graded on how tolerant they looked. But some didn't bother hiding their confusion. The receptionist the first day had looked him up and down and said, "Deliveries go through the back entrance." Elijah had calmly responded, "I'm here to play piano, not drop off a sandwich." She blushed, apologized, and printed his temporary badge without another word. But it stayed with him. Every time he passed the mirror in the second-floor hallway, framed in gold, towering above the practice rooms, he saw what they saw, a courier in street shoes walking among baby grand pianos. The lessons were intense. His assigned coach, Dr. Nolan, an austere man with wire-rimmed glasses and a trimmed beard, didn't waste time with small talk. "You have exceptional ear training," he said during their first session, scribbling notes furiously as Elijah finished an improvisation. "But your hand posture is inconsistent. Your pedal control is aggressive. You rely on instinct where you should use structure." Elijah nodded. "I'm not trying to change your voice," Nolan added. "I'm trying to give it a vocabulary." That part stuck. By the third week, Elijah was playing list etudes he'd once considered impossible. He practiced until his wrists ached, then wrapped them in cold towels and practiced more. He kept working delivery shifts in the evening, kept cooking for Ava, kept paying bills. But at night, when the city got quiet, he stayed up writing music. Not because someone told him to. Because the floodgates had opened. One afternoon, Elijah arrived home to find Ava in the kitchen, elbows deep in pancake batter. "You're not making pancakes for dinner again?" he said, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. "Correction," she said. "I'm making banana chocolate pancakes. For dinner." He sniffed the air. "Is that cinnamon?" Boom. "Okay, fine," he said, leaning against the counter. "You win." Ava grinned. "You always say that. Because you always cheat." She flipped a pancake with dramatic flair, then said, "So, how's piano Hogwarts?" Elijah chuckled. "Hard. Wild. Incredible." "Any jerks?" "A few." She arched a brow. "Want me to come throw hands?" Tempting. They sat on the floor with pancakes stacked between them, syrup running in slow rivers. Elijah told her about Dr. Nolan, about the recital hall he'd gotten to play in, about the old Steinway that reminded him of the church piano at Good Hope. Ava listened quietly. "You sound different," she said. "How?" "Like you're not chasing something anymore. Like you're making it." That hit him harder than she knew. "I still feel like I don't belong sometimes," he admitted. "Like they're waiting for me to trip." "Then don't trip," she said. "Fly." He smiled, ruffling her hair. "You're so much smarter than me." "Obviously." The next week, his first official performance was scheduled, an informal studio concert open to faculty and students. 10 performers. 20-minute sets. No formal judging, just observation. But for Elijah, it might as well have been Carnegie Hall. He debated what to wear for 2 days. Langford sent a stylist. Elijah sent them away. In the end, he wore a black button-down shirt, clean jeans, and his best pair of sneakers. If they didn't like it, they'd just have to listen harder. The concert was held in a minimalist hall with perfect acoustics and 50 leather-backed seats. When Elijah stepped on stage, the room hushed immediately. He could see Dr. Nolan in the back row, arms crossed. He could see 2 students whispering near the side wall. He took a breath. And he played. He began with his own arrangement of Bill Evans's Peace Peace, weaving in gospel motifs and blues flourishes that melted and reformed like wax over fire. He played like someone who wasn't trying to prove anything anymore, just trying to tell the truth. When he finished, the applause was scattered, unsure. But Nolan stood and nodded once. That was enough. Later that night, Elijah sat on the fire escape outside their apartment, headphones over his ears, his cheap keyboard balanced across his knees. Ava curled up in a blanket beside him, watching the stars blink in and out behind the haze of streetlights. "I think I'm getting better," he said. "You're already the best. I mean, like, actually good. With technique. With structure." Ava nudged his shoulder. "You've always had the music. Now you're just learning how to carry it longer." They sat in silence for a while. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Miss what?" When it was just us. Quiet. Simple. Ava shrugged. Sometimes. But you were always playing toward something bigger. Now you're closer. So, no. I don't miss it. He looked at her. Thanks, he said. For what? For reminding me where the music started. She grinned. Duh. He played a few soft notes on the keyboard, a melody he'd been building for days. It had no name. Not yet. But it had heart. And for once that was enough. Elijah didn't notice the email until the train ride home. It had been a long day, 5 hours of theory drills, a master class that left his fingers raw, and a half-eaten sandwich in the practice room that now tasted like rubber in his stomach. He was scrolling through Ava's texts, memes and photos of a crooked science fair volcano, when the subject line caught his eye. Concerns about programming the Langford pianist. It had been forwarded to him by Dr. Nolan with no message attached. Elijah tapped it open. The original email was from a faculty member he didn't know, Dr. Gerald T. Whitley, listed as Senior Lecturer, 20th Century Harmony. The message was short, cold, and clinical. To whom it may concern. I'm writing regarding the upcoming showcase series for winter semester. I understand Mr. Langford has recommended the inclusion of Mr. Elijah Reed, the recent addition to our exploratory mentorship program. While I appreciate Mr. Reed's enthusiasm, I must question whether we're prioritizing philanthropy over proficiency. His background, self-taught, informal, non-traditional, raises concerns about the academic integrity of the performance. This is a conservatory, not a talent show. I urge the programming committee to reconsider. Regards, Dr. G.T. Whitley. Elijah stared at the screen, the train rattling past blurred lights. He read the email again. And again. By the third time his throat had gone dry. Philanthropy over proficiency. The phrase echoed like a hammer in his chest. When he got home, Ava was sitting on the living room floor cutting colored paper for a school project. She looked up, beamed, then paused. What happened? Nothing, he lied. You're blinking like a cartoon character after they get hit with a frying pan. He forced a laugh, dropped his bag, and sat beside her. Just tired. But his mind was still on that email. On Dr. Whitley. On the word talent show. All the years of pushing through silence, prejudice, financial strain, reduced to a line in an email by someone who'd never even heard him play. Langford called the next morning. You saw it, he said. I saw it. You're not backing out of the showcase. I wasn't planning to. Good. There was a pause. You know what the best revenge is, Elijah? Getting famous? No, Langford said. Staying in the room. That week, Elijah threw himself into practice with a new edge. He didn't just want to play well, he wanted to play like the keys owed him respect. He refined everything, posture, tempo, articulation. He trimmed the fat from his phrasing, tightened his transitions. He chose 3 pieces for the showcase, 1 classical, 1 jazz, and 1 original. Dr. Nolan didn't mention the email, but during rehearsal he said, There's fire in you this week. Don't burn yourself down with it. Elijah said nothing. Just kept playing. Then one afternoon someone knocked on the practice room door. Elijah paused mid-scale and opened it. Standing there was Kyle Godwin. Elijah's breath caught. Kyle hadn't changed much since middle school. Taller, stockier, same cocky tilt to his jaw. But his hair was shorter now, his polo shirt pressed. Elijah Reed, Kyle said, arms folded. Man, it is you. Elijah took a step back. What the hell are you doing here? I go here. Composition track. 2nd year. Elijah blinked. You're at the conservatory? Yeah, crazy, right? Kyle said, stepping into the room without being invited. Guess they're letting all kinds of folks in these days. Elijah crossed his arms. You still good at jokes? Kyle looked around the room like he was evaluating its worth. I heard about your piano stunt at Langford's house. Half the department's talking about it. Some people think it's inspiring. Others think it's, I don't know, a stunt. Funny, Elijah said. You always used to say I wasn't good enough to be a musician. Kyle smiled. I was wrong. You're better than I thought. Just not sure if it's built to last. Elijah stared at him. You came in here just to say that? Kyle shrugged. I came in here to remind you this isn't some open mic. This is the conservatory. You're not the only one with talent. I never said I was, Elijah said. But I don't need permission to be here. Kyle looked at him, the smile fading. Then he turned and walked out. Elijah closed the door slowly and sat back down at the piano. He stared at the keys for a long time before placing his hands again. This was a middle school. And this time no one was going to laugh. The day of the showcase arrived cold and crisp. Students dressed in black lined up outside the hall, carrying flutes, sheet music, nerves. The green room backstage buzzed with anxiety and whispered rehearsals. Elijah sat in the corner, eyes closed, headphones on. Not listening to music, just muting the world. His name was third on the program. When it was time, he stepped out onto the stage. The lights were warm. The audience, mostly faculty, students, and donors, filled the small auditorium. Elijah didn't scan for faces. He didn't need to. He brought everything with him. He opened with Debussy's Reflet's Dawn Low, a piece that shimmered like morning glass. He played it fluidly, letting his fingers speak like waves. The second piece was Oscar Peterson's Hymn to Freedom, a soaring, rhythmically intense piece full of hope and resolve. And then his original. He called it Ash and Bloom. It started with dissonance, sharp, aching notes that sounded like doors slamming. But slowly the chords grew warmer, the tempo eased. A melody emerged, half lullaby, half prayer. It was a song about holding grief in one hand and joy in the other. A song about survival. A song for Ava. For his mother. For himself. He played the last note and held it, letting the sound hang in the room like incense. Then silence. Then applause. Not polite. Not hesitant. Real. Thunderous. Backstage, Dr. Nolan found him. You made your point. Elijah smiled. Which one? Nolan's lips twitched. All of them. A few minutes later, someone else approached. Elijah turned. It was Whitley. The professor cleared his throat. Mr. Reed. Dr. Whitley. Whitley looked tense, as if caught between obligation and discomfort. I underestimated your ability, he said. Publicly. Elijah said nothing. Whitley shifted. That won't happen again. And then he walked away. Elijah exhaled slowly. He'd stayed in the room. Now they knew why. The church hadn't changed much. Same red brick walls, same iron gate that squeaked when you pushed it too fast. The parking lot had fresh paint lines and a newer sign now hung out front, Good Hope Baptist Church, a home for all who wander. But the windows still shimmered with colored light from the same worn-out panes Elijah used to sit beneath, dreaming of grand pianos and open stages. He stood at the side entrance with his hands in his coat pockets, heart thumping harder than it had at the showcase. The early evening air smelled of rain and pine needles. He could hear choir voices drifting through the walls, warm and wobbly. Inside, Sister Annette was rehearsing with the youth choir. Her voice, still as steady as stone, floated above the others, leading them through an old Mahalia Jackson hymn. Elijah had texted her that morning. Any chance I could borrow the old piano for an hour or two? She responded with, come home. The bench is still warm. Now he hesitated just outside the sanctuary door. He wasn't sure why. It wasn't nerves. It was something else, something like reverence. He stepped in. The sanctuary was empty except for a few choir members and Sister Annette, who glanced back mid-rehearsal and gave him a proud, no-nonsense nod. The piano, her piano, stood at the front of the room, the same battered upright that had launched him into sound and freedom and self. He walked to it slowly, ran his fingers across the chipped wood, sat down. The bench squeaked just the way he remembered. Sister Annette cut the choir off gently. Break, y'all. Come back in 15. As the students wandered off, she walked toward him with her arms folded and her eyes misty. Well, she said, you grew into those hands after all. Elijah smiled. Still got a long way to go. She touched his shoulder. You're already there. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Play something for me, she said. So he did. He played Ash and Bloom again, but this time slower, stripped of the performance polish. He let the pain breathe, let the joy peek through like light through clouds. Sister Annette sat in the front pew, eyes closed, fingers laced in her lap. When he finished, she opened her eyes. She would have loved that. I think she heard it, Elijah said. And somehow he believed it. The following week he was scheduled to speak at a local arts and education event at Westfield Middle School, the same school where a 13-year-old Elijah once cried backstage after being mocked for playing piano. It was surreal walking through those halls again. The murals had changed. The vending machines were newer. But the smells, the wood polish, the cafeteria fries, the paper and sweat and middle school awkwardness, were the same. He wore a plain black suit with a maroon button-down underneath, no tie. He'd come straight from a rehearsal. The principal, a short man with a kind smile and an afro pick tucked neatly into his hair, welcomed him with a firm handshake. "We're honored to have you, Mr. Reed," he said. "We've got students from multiple schools in the district here today." They led him to the small auditorium, where about 200 students buzzed with the kind of barely contained chaos unique to preteens forced into folding chairs. A few recognized him from social media. One student even whispered, "Yo, that's the piano guy from the TikTok." Elijah smiled. He took the stage without notes, without slides, just his voice and a heart full of things he wished someone had told him years ago. He talked about fear, how it whispers when you're close to something important. He talked about balance, how ambition means nothing if you forget who you're carrying with you. He talked about music, not just the notes but the silence between them. And then he sat at the school's upright piano, slightly out of tune, missing a pedal cap, and played an arrangement of Ava's Waltz, with a little more swing and sunshine than usual. The room was silent when he finished. Then a girl in the front row raised her hand. "You ever feel like you don't belong?" she asked. Elijah nodded. "All the time." She tilted her head. "Even now?" He thought about the showcase. About Whitley. About Kyle. About the conservatory. About the room full of suits and spotlights. About the $1 million piano in the Langford mansion. And then he thought about Ava in the kitchen with pancake batter on her nose, humming one of his melodies under her breath. "I belong wherever I bring my whole self," he said. "And so do you." The girl smiled. That was enough. That night, Elijah sat at the edge of Ava's bed, watching her drift toward sleep. "You awake?" he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. "Barely. I got asked to record something," he said. "Langford's setting up studio time. They want a whole project. Original music." Ava sat up halfway, blinking. "That's huge." He nodded. "But," he said carefully, "it means I'll have to pull back on deliveries. On everything, really. Focus. The whole thing. I might not be around as much. Might need help keeping things in order." Ava rolled her eyes. "You're not Superman. I can microwave my own dinner." He laughed. "You say that now." "Do it, Eli," she said. "Don't hold back. Not anymore." He looked at her, this girl who had held him together more times than he could count. His sister. His root. "Okay," he said. "We do this. Together." She yawned and lay back down. "Call it the Ava tapes. I want royalties. 10%. 20. He kissed her forehead. "Go to sleep." 3 months later, Elijah sat alone in a soundproof booth, headphones tight, fingers hovering over a concert grand. The red light blinked. "Take one," came the producer's voice through the monitor. "Whenever you're ready." Elijah cracked his knuckles. He thought of the delivery bag slung over his shoulder, the sweat of pedaling uphill, the sting of laughter from middle school boys. He thought of his mother's voice. He thought of the first key he ever pressed, unsure and shy and perfect. He thought of Langford. Of Sister Annette. Of Dr. Nolan. Of Ava. He smiled. And he played. Not for approval. Not for validation. But because it was his. Because it always had been. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.